I've become more and more sensitive to a larger effect on the quality of our democracy, right? So sex work now is an obsession among politicians in the Netherlands, particularly Christian politicians and people on the far right. What they do on a regular basis is go into the media, on television for example, and lie. So make up data. So last Sunday, in a widely watched program, the leader of the Christian Democrats made all sorts of statements like 90% of the women behind windows, that we have window prostitution in the Netherlands, are coerced into prostitution. The money goes to the men behind them. Now, the numbers are very clear about Amsterdam. Numbers are rarely clear, but these numbers are clear. That is, there's a handful of cases of trafficking in the red light district in Amsterdam in the period 2011-2015. A handful, less than 10. So that simply is a lie. The national public prosecutor, same thing, goes on television and then throws onto one heap drug trade, trafficking in women, and coercion, and then comes up with numbers which are just simply made up out of thin air. I think if you do that, if politicians and public officials willingly lie on television, then you erode the quality of your democracy. And obviously the ends justify any mean. And that has been going on now for a decade. The media, by the way, play an incredibly negative role here. So anybody who says anything about prostitution in the Netherlands gets into the media if you're a politician. They never ever check the factual basis of what is being said. So the result is a constant amplification of these nonsense statements, which then create an atmosphere of, oh, we have this huge problem here in the Netherlands. Prostitution is not a big phenomenon. We did our very best to get to the bottom of the numbers. Now, one of the big problems in prostitution policy is there are no numbers around, no accurate numbers and no precise numbers. So we tried to change that. We were quite naive in hindsight. But we did our very best. For example, my researchers, I had a couple of co-researchers, Sietske Altink and Helge Amersberger. In the Netherlands, they went and sat in a cafe on the corner of a prostitution area where they had a view of about 6 or 7 windows. And what you see is widely varying occupancy rates, based on the time of the day or the particular day. Now, what this signifies is there's huge mobility in the prostitution world. And actually, in our interviews confirmed that. So we have sex workers who, in a 6-month period, worked in 4 different cities in 2 different countries. It is not uncommon. And in fact, this kind of freedom to choose when and where you work is one of the attractions of the job for many women. The mobility is so large that it is exceedingly difficult to count, because you constantly run into the problem of double counting and so on and so on. You also need to make a distinction between what we call, and nobody ever does that, the daily numbers and the aggregate numbers. So daily numbers is the only accurate way to estimate the size of a prostitution market. So it's the number of sex workers that work in a particular location on a particular day. Let's say the city of Amsterdam or the city of Utrecht. The aggregate numbers are all the unique sex workers that work in a particular year in a particular place. But because of the high mobility, that number is much higher. It doesn't tell you much, right? So we did our very, very best to come up with an accurate, more or less accurate estimation of the daily numbers in the 4 cities. It's much lower than what you think. Politicians go on television claiming that there are 8,000 sex workers in Amsterdam. Our numbers, and they were actually corroborated later by another research study, are more in the low 500-600s. So in fact, we got into a huge fight with our cities when we came up with those numbers, and they, of course, accused us that our methodology was wrong. But many of those estimates were based on their own reports. We're not in a position to make an estimate of how many sex workers there are in the Netherlands, because those numbers also float around and are used in a political way by saying, oh, the Netherlands has 30,000 sex workers, which is much more than Sweden. See, if you would only criminalize the clients, you would have less or fewer sex workers. But nobody knows how many there are.